Welcome everyone, and sorry for that late start. Thank you for those who are attending online. We also have some people here, so everybody, welcome. We have a special team presenting, tagging team today, 2 PhD students, one from health economics, the other one from the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And just to say, we are trying to develop support groups for our PhD students in the School of Public Health. And we are keen to have you join. So I'm speaking to PhD students and the supervisors who are hoping can encourage your students to join. We'll be having some activities, some meetings. We have an online cohort and an in-person cohort. And you'll be seeing those coming up on your Vula. You've already got, some of you have responded, others haven't. But we'd like to all our PhD students to feel like they're part of a community, because it can be a very lonely experience, as you know, for those who have done PhDs. It can be quite a lonely experience. But for right now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. We'll start with Tsidiso Tolla, who is from the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and she'll be telling us her PhD story. Tsidi, over to you. Let me just get your presentation going. Do we need to come up with this? So that
They can't see the screen. Generally, they can't see the screen. There, we can see it now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks Jennifer. Good afternoon everyone. As introduced, my name is Tsidi, and I am a PhD student at the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Well, I'm a postdoc now, so at the division. But yeah, I'm going to be presenting my PhD project today with the influence of romantic relationships on adolescent boys' sexual and reproductive health attitudes and practices. So for my PhD, I was supervised by Jennifer and Chris, who is not here. So I'm going to start with a brief background. So in South Africa, adolescents are faced with multiple public health issues, and among these are poor sexual and reproductive health outcomes, and high prevalence of HIV and intimate partner violence. So these are some of the issues that unfold in the context of romantic relationships, or sometimes sexual romantic relationships, wherein obviously sex is common or a common activity. And while the sex is not always risky, it does expose adolescents to some form of sexual risk, and also has implications for their sexual and reproductive health outcomes. So the romantic relationships in adolescence can serve as a training ground for these adolescents. They learn how to negotiate sexual consent, they learn how to communicate their sexual needs, and also their sexual preferences in these romantic relationships. Also, what might happen in these romantic relationships is that they might learn how to cater for their partner's needs and the needs of their own needs, and how to deal with emotions arising which might have implications for intimate partner violence. So the focus of my project was on heterosexual adolescent romantic relationships, And these are highly gendered, and adolescent boys in these romantic relationships can be driven by hegemonic masculinities, wherein they might want to emphasize their power and dominance over their girlfriends. And the literature shows that issues around gender dynamics are important in heterosexual relationships, and they have serious implications for sexual decision making, sexual negotiation, and HIV, as well as intimate partner violence. Okay, so the research question driving the study was, how does the heterosexual romantic relationship context shape adolescent boys' sexual and reproductive health, HIV, and intimate partner violence related attitudes and practices? I also had 4 sub-questions that I explored, and the first one was, what are adolescent boys' expectations in heterosexual romantic relationships, and what meanings do these boys draw from these romantic relationships? The second one was, how do the meanings that adolescent boys attach to their heterosexual romantic relationships and the expectations in these relationships influence sexual negotiation and sexual decision making? The third one was how adolescent boys understand and express power in these relationships, and what factors in the broader social and economic context influence expression of their power. And then the last one was what social factors shape adolescent boys' experiences and perceptions of intimate partner violence in romantic relationships. Okay, so the study was purely qualitative, and participants were adolescent boys aged 14 to 19 from Guguletu in Cape Town. I received ethics clearance from the Human Research Ethics Committee at the University of Cape Town, and data collection. I started data collection in June 2021, which lasted up until December 2022. So I had 3 data collection methods that I used in the study, and these were individual interviews, wherein 28 boys took part in, and the interviews were telephonically or via WhatsApp call. I also did focus group discussions, and I did 8 focus group discussions. And so I grouped the boys in terms of the in terms of their ages, because I didn't want to have younger adolescents with older adolescents, wherein they might not be comfortable speaking. And all focus group discussions were done in person. So the third data collection method was the diary entries, and 13 boys participated in the diary entries. All diaries were handwritten, and each adolescent did 10 diary entries. Okay. So the study results. So my thesis is made up of 4 finding chapters. There's chapter 1, titled "You Are Not a Man, Boy," or experiences of manhood, power, and intimate partner violence in romantic relationships. And here the findings show that there is no one fixed way of being a boy or of thinking about manhood. As boys continue to draw on the masculine ideas from their context, they also contested and rejected these cultural ideas around what it means to be a man. So the chapter also highlights some of the complex issues around power, dominance, and intimate partner violence, and also shows some of the potential dissonance between boys' self-perceptions of themselves as perpetrators of violence and as victims of intimate partner violence, and how they kind of struggle in terms of questioning social norms around intimate partner violence, but also trying to get to that point of being non-violent themselves. So the second chapter, titled Mating Beds, Sexual Intercourse in the Romantic Relationships of Adolescent Boys. So here the findings show that boys battle with uncertainties and anxieties that comes with having sex, but also they were resisting and conforming to some of the gender norms around sex. So on one hand, sexual intercourse was perceived as marking a shift from boyhood to manhood and qualified these boys as real men, whereas on the other hand, they felt anxious about the act of having first sex. And also what made boys' anxieties worse was the pressure and expectations for them to prove their manhood, which included having to perform when they were having sex, but also trying to negotiate issues around sexual consent. Okay, so chapter 3, titled Love and Vulnerability in the Romantic Lives of Adolescent Boys. So here, the findings show that boys are looking for more than just sex in romantic relationships, and that hegemonic masculinity is not the only thing that is shaping their ideas or their behaviors in these romantic relationships. They desire to be loved and to love, but also they seemed to navigate the romantic relationships with mixed feelings of the anxiety and uncertainty and also self-doubt. And findings further showed that boys are emotional and obviously contradicting the perception that masculinity ought to be characterized by invulnerability. Okay. And the last chapter, titled Adolescent Boys' Sexual Attitudes and Practices. So here, the findings show that boys' ideas around condom use are obviously not fixed, and that condom decision making is not solely done by adolescent boys in these relationships. They show that sexual decision making around family planning is shaped by both resistance and conformity to some social and cultural norms, and that these boys in their romantic relationships displayed a sense of agency in terms of family planning, wherein they felt they should be responsible for making sure that there's no pregnancy. And the findings also show that even though boys do have social networks in their disposal, like peers and their parents, to assist in terms of navigating the adolescent phase, they seemed to navigate the phase or their romantic relationships ill-equipped, and obviously making them vulnerable to poor sexual decision making and ultimately poor sexual outcomes. And yeah, so the study has some implications for policy and practice. The first one is that there is a need to dehomogenize the discourse around boys. So the framing around adolescent boys' behavior as problematic kind of obscures an understanding or appreciation of other forms of masculinity that boys might ascribe to. Number two, research and sexual and reproductive health programs should consider and cater for adolescent boys' vulnerabilities and uncertainties. So, as I've mentioned briefly earlier, that boys may experience vulnerabilities and uncertainties that they might not always know how to deal with in a world that considers them as invulnerable or problematic or predators. Number three, romantic relationships are an important context in shaping sexual behavior, including sexual decision making. So there's therefore a need for public health programs and research to recognize the romantic relationships, as a context that shapes sexual behavior and the context in which adolescents may potentially assess their sexual risk and therefore or lack of and obviously also has implications for their sexual and reproductive outcomes. And the fourth implication is that the role of parents in the romantic relationships and sexual health of adolescents should be supported. So parents should be able to have open discussions with their adolescents about romantic relationships and related issues. So the idea is that sexual and reproductive health programs may need to capacitate parents to talk to their children about these issues, because the issue is that parents might not be comfortable in terms of talking to their kids about such issues, and that's something that also came out as in the data. So the last one is to improve the sexual reproductive health outcomes. Boys and girls need to be equipped with adequate and up-to-date sexual and reproductive health information. And this is because in the romantic relationship, partners may decide what works for them, and perceptions about dating and what happens in the romantic relationships may be co-constructed between partners. So if in instances where we leave, say for example, adolescent boys in these programs, then there's that kind of imbalance in terms of ideas around what should happen. Yeah, and in conclusion, so the romantic relationship is an important context because it is a context in which, obviously notwithstanding the broader context and culture, partners may choose to adhere or to challenge ideas about dating, sex, and issues around power and other things that happen in the romantic relationship. And also, it is important to take into consideration the romantic relationship context and its dynamics, as these can inform efforts to improve the sexual and reproductive health of boys, and including HIV and intimate partner violence outcomes. Okay, so this is the end. I have some acknowledgements on the slide, but yeah, you can read those.
Sidi, thank you very much for engaging presentation. We just want to take some time to just a few minutes for questions, and we'll start with people who are in the room. If you have any questions or comments for Sidi, and then we'll get to the people who are online. We also have not forgotten about you, so we'll also have an opportunity for you to ask questions. So let's start with the people who are here. Akim?
Yes, well done, Tsidi. It's actually a comment that, I mean, in the HIV space at the moment, more focusing on young women. It's quite interesting putting this on the agenda as well for policymakers. Like, if we leave the boys out, they actually play a role in how this space is changing over time. So it's quite interesting. I'm looking forward for the findings to be published and implemented in the policy space as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Thank you very much. What I really like is how creative your work is, and even the titles of your different results chapters. I love your titles. I really like the way you present. And also just to say to Jennifer and Lucia, thank you for doing this. I really think of this addition to our PhD program. All these things. So my question is about policy implications. So having sadly been involved in some work where quite a substantial investment was made and a large trial was run on really a similar topic to your PhD, issue with it all, not on anything. But the intervention schools, things got worse than in the control schools. So on every measure, things got worse. What are your pearls of wisdom for policymakers about how to, what is there's something that you can find from this particular in-depth work that can help us to to know what to do in the space of SRH and or preventing unintended pregnancies and or STIs and or HIV.
Sure. I don't think I have any. Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the work that has been done, and obviously a lot of it has been done with adolescent girls. So I'm not sure if the project you're referring to was it girls.
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like as much as a lot of efforts are put into capacitating and empowering adolescent girls, so when they go back into their communities or into their relationships or romantic relationships, then it's difficult for them to kind of make that switch. But then I feel like if we had programs wherein we were taking boys and girls kind of in the same journey, then it would be easier to kind of challenge current norms around, attitude around HIV, sexual decision making and negotiation and things like that. Because it's also interesting that a lot of times when we talk about, obviously adolescent boys are not at a much higher risk than adolescent girls, particularly in terms of HIV.
Yeah.
Yes, but when we talk about adolescent boys, it paints kind of a picture that they are the problem.
Yeah.
But then I was surprised when I did my study, I mentioned briefly their attitudes around family planning and how they were invested and wanted to make sure that either the girl is on contraceptives or in most instances they relied on the pull-out method just to ensure that there's no pregnancy happening. So that was surprising for me because I did not go in thinking that's something that I would find.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just making sure that we don't leave the 50% behind and just focus on that result.
There's one comment in the chat, but I think you've already answered the question, Tsidiso. It's from a vet, and it says about the agency boys feel around family planning, and if you can talk more about that. But I think I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, ask a follow-up thing. Did you get a sense of what kinds of contraception they were using? So in terms of if the girl was maybe receiving contraception, and how did this to what about condoms? How did they speak in relation to that?
Yeah. So the agency, so I term it agency because they actively worked on making sure preventing pregnancy, and as such, none of them had impregnated a girl. And yeah, as you saw, it was from age 14 to 19 years old. So that maybe potentially speaks to how they're really working hard to make sure that there's no pregnancy happening.
Yeah.
But in terms of the contraceptives that they were using or that they spoke about, so there was the idea of supporting the girl to take the injection or the pill, and that support kind of meant actually going with her to the clinic, or anyway, it could be a way of monitoring and making sure that they go to the clinic. But yeah, they spoke about actually going with the girl to the clinic to get contraceptives, and some of them spoke about making sure that they always use a condom, and that condom use for them was not something that was decided by how the girl felt at that particular time, because for some of them it was not constant. So the girl would decide, okay, today we use a condom, today we don't use a condom. So there were those who used condoms consistently, and then there were those who used the pull-out method, which they said you need to master the pull-out game. And they said, so I asked them if it's working, because obviously when you do read the literature, it says it's not that effective, but they said it is working since they haven't implemented anyone. So yeah.
Yeah.
So then we have 2 or so minutes for the people who are online. Would you like to unmute and ask a question? This is your moment. Those who are online. All right. I take it that silence means consent, or that we are together. But should something come up later, you may have an opportunity. But let's just give CD a round of applause. And we're now going to introduce our second presenter, Akim Tafadzwa Lukwa from Health Economics. So he's coming to give us a different presentation, similar, South African context, but a different presentation. So we'll hand over to Akim just in a short while. Let me just take the presentation and share screen. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone present. So as introduced by Jennifer, my name is Akim Tafadzwa Lukwa from the Health Economics Unit. Recently completed my PhD, and I'll be presenting my work. So just to give a little bit of background in terms of the context of my research. So if you look at this table, it shows African countries by highest and lowest prevalence of obesity among women, which was done, a projection that was done by the NCD Risk Factor Collaboration Group, a projection done up to 2030. It shows that number 1 is South Africa. And you see a similar trend even if you compare within South Africa between males and females. It sort of like give the same direction in terms of proportions. Then when you look at the South African Demographic Health Survey of 2016, it shows alarming rates in terms of obesity across different races among women, which actually prompted the idea of doing this research. So from the literature that we had reviewed, it actually shows that there was lack of access to healthy foods, and it was disproportionate exposure to unhealthy foods, specifically in low-income communities or minority communities. And the food environment in terms of the urban settlements, it showed that it was characterized by obesogenic and low-cost, high-energy dense street foods, most of which were processed, and there was high access to fast foods. And the access to this type of foods actually caused a lot of problems, which are reflected in the trends that I've presented earlier, both globally and within the South African context. So moving on to give a little bit of description between the two groups, which are in the informal savings groups, the askers and the rosters. So in the systematic review, we focused mainly on distinguishing between accumulating saving groups and rotating saving credit associations, which are formerly known as stokvels in the context of South Africa. And several studies that we actually came across provided ample evidence that these askers or rosters present important means of livelihood and sustenance, especially among women from low socioeconomic households. So within askers, the main difference between askers and rosters is that askers are saving groups where funds are contributed regularly, but are not immediately withdrawn, unlike rosters. So within askers, they are left to grow or accrue some sort of interest. However, with rosters, there are financial initiatives that comprise of self-selected members of a group who regularly meet and contribute equal amount of savings towards a common fund. However, within this group, no amount of interest is actually accrued compared to askers. So in our study, we found that most of the women who actually participated in South African context, specifically to groceries, towards the common goal of purchasing groceries, normally use rosters opposed to askers. So the rationale of this PhD is reflected by obesity trends that I showed earlier in the first slide of my presentation. It shows that there are high obesity rates among women compared to men, both globally and in sub-Saharan Africa, specifically in the context of South Africa. And South Africa is characterized with the coexistence of undernutrition, hunger, and obesity within households, even within individuals, which might be mainly driven by the inconsistency of food access. So from then, we derive that roxers and askers actually play an important means of livelihood and sustenance for poor women or women coming from low socioeconomic households. The overall aim of my PhD was to determine the extent of which stokvels or rotating saving and credit associations may be used to implement health eating in the context of South Africa. So my first objective was a systematic review where we look at, can informal saving groups promote food security and social, economic and health transformations, especially among women in urban sub-Saharan Africa. And our findings actually show something that was quite interesting. It showed that those rosters or askers are actually a crucial piece in advancing social and economic health transformations, especially among women, as it shows that most of the studies, women participate in this type of informal saving groups. But one thing that we also felt to notice was that there was no direct role play of these askers or roxers in food security, as it was not often a primary focus of these informal saving groups, but rather it was just an additive common goal that would come after groups have come together. In the South African context, from the studies that we reviewed, specifically from South Africa, they showed that grocery stokvels are one of the major types of stokvels that are dominated by women, while its investment stokvels were actually dominated by men in two of the studies that we found in this review. And it was also quite something to note that retailers and suppliers had recognized the relevance of grocery stokvels from a profit-making perspective. Hence, they were employing various strategies to retain stokvels while dissuading bulk buying because of challenges such as storage, spoilage, and loss of nutritional value. So they'll normally host stokvel endeavors where they actually sponsor all stokvel groups to come, and they would see some sort of the bundled products that they'll be selling for that space. The review also showed that the stokvels are used advantageously by both urban men and women. And it also showed that there is greater relevance of roxers or askers in the lives of urban women compared to men. As I highlighted earlier, I think about 96% of the askers and roxers that we actually came across within this study were mainly found by women opposed to men. Objective 2 was doing a stakeholder mapping analysis where we actually interviewed several stakeholders to understand how they interact with stokvels. It was quite interesting as we got into the study. Our thinking was that stokvels have got this power, economic power, because they've pulled resources together. They've got the economic power to actually demand what they want from the stakeholders in the retail industry, which was not the case when we interviewed the stakeholders. Because they'll say that, for instance, if a retail giant has got some product that they want to push, they would heavily discount that bundle specifically. Because stokvels are worried more about food security opposed to food quality, they would go for that bundle. Not necessarily that they've got the power to change what the supplier would give to them. This paper was also recently published. So the main themes that actually came out from the stakeholder mapping was social conversions, stokvels, and healthy foods. Within the social conversions, it actually showed unincorporated saving, borrowing associations, maximum value, partnerships, and mutual benefit. But bear in mind, these are ideas that are coming from stakeholders, what they think about stokvels, persuaded by one, their interaction and what they believe. But one common statement that came across board when interviewing the stakeholders was that nobody knows the stokvels terrain. It's a protected environment. As much as you want to engage with them, it's a close community that is closely knit. So for you to be part of it, they have to invite you in. And the stakeholder perceptions of stokvel organizational structure and practices influence their demand for and access to affordable, healthy food options, as I highlighted earlier. Some of the stakeholders who have worked in NPOs in terms of distributing food, trying to maximize, trying to reduce food waste, also alluded to the fact that there is need for understanding proximity to farms and partnership with farmers, which will be crucial in accessing fresh and healthy produce at a raw price. However, one of the most key questions to date that still came during the studies across the 4 objectives was, how do you define healthy food? It varies contextually. Then we went on to do a realist evaluation. We're now trying to engage with stokvels. So initially we spoke to the stokvel leaders, 20 of them from different stokvels, trying to understand the dynamics in terms of governance and how they operate. Then for the second phase, we did focus group discussions with 40 participants, 2 from each of the 20 stokvels, trying to understand how they also understand governance and how they do their buying. The findings from the realist evaluation show that stokvels influence collective purchasing decisions, financial management, leading to improved household food security and economic reliance. So it was not a one-man band. Everyone would decide what they would buy, either be it quarterly, after 3 months, at the end of the year. It was a decision that was made by the entire stokvel participants. However, while these groups foster social ties and support communal decision-making, there was evidence in gap in their direct efforts toward facilitating access to healthy food. I remember in one of the interviews in the focus group discussions, one of the ladies actually said, "Why would I worry about what my children are consuming if the main goal is to make sure that there is food on the table first?" So the main goal was making sure that their food secure, then at a later stage would worry about what we eat. However, it was also quite fascinating that there were older women who were highlighting that, I've got blood pressure, I was diagnosed with diabetes, I actually worry about what I also eat. So instead of joining a stokvel that buys food for everyone and we share, I joined a stokvel where we only contribute money and I get the money loaded on either ShopRite card or Pick and Pay voucher card. Then I select the food that's appropriate for my household. So it shows that the idea of healthy eating, yes, it's there, while it's the concept of food security is much more prominent among stokvels. So the takeaway from the realist was that the research highlighted the potential for stokvels to play a more intentional role in promoting healthy food choices, a potential that remains largely unexplored. However, one of the suggestions or recommendations that we made from this study was that to fully harness the benefits of stokvels, future studies should focus on utilizing their inherent attributes of agency, economic independence, social support to develop targeted strategies that promote the demand for and accessibility of nutritious and affordable health food options. So all the 3 objectives were literally just formative work that was going to inform the discrete choice experiment, where we're trying to see if we present different attributes and choices to the stokvel members, what would they select, what makes sense to them. So this is just a hypothetical food choice sets that we had for our DC experiment, but the findings were quite interesting as well from the discrete choice experiment. So talking about determinants of shopping patterns, we actually realized that shopping frequency, shop delivery preference, proximity to shopping venues significantly detected the purchasing patterns of stokvel members overshadowing the perceived value for money. And notably, over half of the participants were single, unemployed females, heading households with an average size of 5, suggesting the earlier finding that we saw in the systematic review that stokvels actually play a more important role in supporting female-led households and ensuring food security. So the takeaway from the DCE was that the findings revealed a strong preference for logistical factors, shopping frequencies, delivery options, and store proximity over the cost consideration in their decision-making process. Therefore, there is need for interventions that align with stokvels' unique purchasing patterns, such as synchronizing health promoting initiatives with their regular shopping schedules and improving infrastructure to enhance access to diverse food outlets. Recognizing these patterns is vital for developing strategies that facilitate better food access and promote nutritional well-being. One of the key highlights that came from the focus group discussions that we also saw in the DCE was that people were willing to travel far to get better quality in terms of fruits and vegetables for those that had a specific diet requirement. So it means the idea of healthy food notion might be a little bit understandable in the context of lower socioeconomic households, but the biggest challenge is their primary goal is food security opposed to healthy food. So the overall key takeaways from the PhD thesis was stokvel as a catalyst for disciplined savings and financial literacy indirectly contributed to the improvement of nutritional choices and food security. And from the stockholders mapping, we argue that stokvel operations are significantly influenced by external factors such as government policies, economic conditions, cultural norms, technological advancements, which shape their efficacy in achieving financial and health-related goals. Then the realists actually speaking to the people who participate in the stokvels actually show that stokvels often include bulk buying strategies, which ensure food security and affordability for their members, as buying in single units, you wouldn't gain much of the discounts. And some would go as far as depositing their money, their stokvel contribution, with big retailers such as Macro, without accruing any interest, and then just go and buy food at the end of the year. Then from the discrete choice experiment, it highlighted that members' preference regarding healthy food options, thus offering valuable insight into the behavioral economics of food choice within the context of stokvels. However, one thing to note also from our DC is the struggle is defining what's healthy, to which communities, in what context. So the overall conclusion and recommendations rest on stokvels are a vital component of the urban food systems. They significantly impact women's health and economic empowerment by influencing healthier eating habits and facilitating community engagement in health and health promotion. However, the effectiveness of stokvels is subject to various challenges, including economic constraints and the need for supportive infrastructural policy framework. One of the key highlights also that I noticed from across the 4 objectives was that people who would sacrifice contributing their grant money to the stokvel as much as the whole grant money value to the stokvel, so that they ensure that they are food secure throughout the year. To enhance the positive impact of stokvels, it is recommended that government policy should provide more robust support and integration of these groups into the formal economic framework. The realist evaluation actually showed that one of the norms that they would do in terms of people who default payments was deal with it from a societal perspective, where it's either you're shunned by the community if you don't pay on time. Like, there's no legal framework that actually protects stokvel. Although there are few who actually have got a constitution and open a bank account, but most of them, it's actually informal. Health promotion strategies need to incorporate stokvels as platforms for disseminating nutritional education and influencing food choices. Many thanks to my supervisors, Funke, Vicky, and Faye, and Tabitha and Pumza, who supported me during the PhD journey with both data collection and guidance, and the collaborators who constantly reviewed my manuscripts. Of the two of the objectives are already published, two are currently under review. Thank you.
Thanks, Tafadzwa, for the interesting presentation. Different. We move from talking about romantic needs and sexuality, we're talking about food and NCDs, which is great. And in the South African context, they are all talking about needs, so there's some similarity, basic needs, basic human needs. So we have a few minutes for interactions. This time, I think we'll start with the people who are online. Sorry. Do you have any questions or comments from anyone who is online? Yes, Vicky?
Thanks very much, and thank you for the invitation to attend both Tsidiso's as well as Akim's thesis presentation. I've got a comment and then a question for Akim, and my comment is that I just want to say that I really want to salute Akim for persevering with this. I think we went into the project thinking that we knew a lot about stokvels, and I think we finished the project realizing how complex the relationships between and within stokvels are in terms of trying to see them as an asset toward a health promotion. And Akim has done really an outstanding job under often very difficult circumstances. So I want to firstly congratulate him, and to also thank the main supervisor, Funke Alaba, and Faye Wyers. But I think my question to Akim is that what is the seeing the potential and understanding the complexity as someone not as a health economist necessarily, but in terms of health promotion, what would be your next steps?
Thank you, Vicky, for the question. I think the next steps will be first to understand the definition we're going to be using for healthy eating, because I think designing a solution without understanding how we are defining healthy might be very tricky, because in different communities, irrespective of all of them being Black South African women, because of different cultural differences, they will define healthy eating different. So even if we are to design a toolkit, how are we going to frame it when the context of healthy eating is actually different? Because we don't have a healthy eating definition that covers across different cultures. So my thinking is, how best can we define healthy eating that it accommodates different cultural understanding and different cultural diets as well? That's the only way we can be able to design a toolkit that will actually enable us to encourage a healthy eating within the stock.
So can I follow on with another question then?
Yes, please.
So I've recently come back from a conference where there was a lot of discussion around indigenous knowledge holders, and the fact that much of our work that we do in health promotion and so on is very colonialized, very westernized, and doesn't take into account indigenous knowledge holders and and I think sometimes we privilege sort of Western healthy eating norms over what might be actually very healthy eating. And so the question, I guess, is to what extent is it our business to define what is healthy eating, but rather to explore that notion with the people themselves? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, definitely that works. That's why I say the cultural aspect plays an important role. Once we understand the context, we're good to go. Once we sit with the people and they tell us how they are defining the healthy eating, then we can help them reframe and integrate their thinking into the toolkit, whatever toolkit that we design. Otherwise, if to do it in our high Eiffel towers, it won't work.
Thank you very much, and thanks for allowing me to question.
All right. Sue has a question on this side.
That was really, really interesting. Thank you so much. It was fascinating. I learned a lot. And I think you said something really interesting about the importance of healthy eating being contextualized. And I think that's, I mean, as you say, I think that's so important, and I don't have a sense of what that looks like. But just to give you an example of why it's coming up in my space, is quite a lot of colleagues have come to me for advice, who run NGOs in this kind of a world, for advice about what to do with what they perceive to be a very confusing set of messages around, so I know this is not all the same, but around children, where on the one hand there's the concern about obesity, and then on the other hand there's the concern about being underweight. And they even feel like it's actually just not the case that there's underweight, but actually the issue, as far as they can see, and this is in a rural area, the issue is actually more on the obesity side, and underweight isn't the problem. And then what do you do? Because obviously your intervention is very different from a food perspective if you're dealing with underweight or obesity. And how do we make sense? So someone who's not an expert like me, how do I make sense of this in order to assist my colleagues who are extremely frustrated about what the Department of Social Development is doing, what some of the major players like DG Murray Trust are doing, because they feel that it's actually not, the issue isn't underweight, the issue is that people are eating fast, the sugars, sweetened beverages, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, for that question. Dennis, we collaborated on a recent paper with Funke where we were looking at the double burden of malnutrition. So you're looking at existence of underweight with a combination of obesity and obesity or overweight. So that's the case you're actually presenting with the double burden of malnutrition, but you can't look at it separately because the way it exists is there's one condition, then there's an additive condition. And you might have a household that has got the mother who's got the double burden of malnutrition and the child who's underweight. Or you can have a child who's overweight and the mother has got DBM. So I think from double burden of malnutrition, so the existence of undernutrition and overweight or obesity. So it's a combination of the two. That's the case you're presenting where it's the existence of double burden of malnutrition. So it's, from a policy perspective, I don't remember from the top of my head, do you remember the recommendations we did in that paper?
I think sometimes they focus more on addressing being obese, and they forget about being undernourished. And sometimes they focus more on being undernourished and forget about obesity. So we recommended that I think there's a way they can be able to focus on the two concurrently. Because if you focus more on one, the other one becomes worse, and vice versa. So we recommend that they can focus simultaneously on both problems at the household level.
But I'll definitely share with you the paper.
Right, we are kind of running out of time. Do we have a burning question from our audience online? Okay, silence means I think we are good for now. Anyone else from here? Okay. Well, a round of applause for Akim for the question. Thank you very much for attending this PhD mentorship kind of session where we are giving our PhDs a chance to present at the meetings. This is the first of many to come, so watch that space. And if you're sitting in and you're a PhD student or supervisor, we've got good stuff for you. So please be in touch with us through our mentorship team in the division headed by Lucia Knight, and working closely with her on that. So thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.